The chalk hit the blackboard with sharp, deliberate strikes. Professor Lawrence Bennett wrote with the kind of confidence that came from 30 years of teaching, 23 academic publications, and a tenure so secure he believed himself untouchable. The integral of x squared times e to the power of negative x, he announced to the lecture hall, his voice carrying over 43 silent college students, from 0 to infinity, equals 2. The equation stretched across the board in white chalk against black. Complex. Graduate level. Designed to intimidate anyone who looked at it. Professor Bennett set down the chalk, brushed white dust from his expensive suit jacket, and turned to face his class with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Williams. His voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. Since you continue to find my advanced calculus course so effortlessly easy, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your supposed brilliance for the class. Comment below where you're watching from. This is about to get intense. Every head in the lecture hall turned toward the front row where 15-year-old Amara Williams sat. The youngest person in the room by 7 years. The only black face among a sea of white and Asian college juniors and seniors. The girl who'd scored perfect marks on every single assignment, quiz, and exam for 3 months straight, a feat that should have earned respect but instead earned suspicion. Amara closed her notebook slowly, her movements careful and measured. She wore a simple purple sweater and jeans that marked her as different from the college students in their university hoodies and Greek life apparel. At 5 feet 2 inches tall with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, she looked even younger than 15. Small. Vulnerable. Easy to intimidate. Professor Bennett was counting on that. Come to the board, Miss Williams. Show us how you solve this integral. Unless, of course, you prefer to finally admit what we both know, that your perfect scores are the result of cheating, not competence. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Around the lecture hall, students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't normal cold calling. This was public humiliation. Targeted. Personal. A grown man setting a trap for a teenager in front of an audience. Some students pulled out their phones, sensing something worth recording. Others stared down at their desks, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The power dynamic was too clear, tenured professor versus minor. Nobody wanted to get involved. Amara stood without a word. Picked up her notebook. Walked down the aisle toward the front of the lecture hall with steady steps that didn't betray nervousness or fear. She was half Professor Bennett's height and a fraction of his age, but her posture stayed straight as she approached the blackboard. You want me to solve that specific problem? Amara asked, her young voice clear and level. Unless you're admitting you can't. Professor Bennett's smile widened. It's quite all right to acknowledge when something is beyond your abilities. You're very young. It's understandable that you might have been overconfident about your placement in this course. Perhaps a remedial section would be more appropriate for someone your age. The condescension dripped from every word. Not just questioning her knowledge, questioning her right to be there at all. Amara accepted the chalk Professor Bennett offered. For exactly 5 seconds, she studied the equation on the board. Her dark eyes moved across the symbols and numbers with the kind of focus that came from years of mathematical training most college students had never received. Then she turned to face Professor Bennett instead of the board. This equation is unsolvable, Amara said clearly, projecting her voice so every student in the lecture hall could hear. Because you wrote it incorrectly. On purpose. Professor Bennett's confident smile faltered for just a moment. Excuse me. You wrote it wrong. Amara pointed to the equation with the chalk. The integral of x squared times e to the power of negative x from 0 to infinity does equal 2. That part is correct. But the integral you've actually written on this board, with the limits and function you've specified, produces a different result. You've manipulated the equation to make it unsolvable while maintaining the appearance of legitimacy. The lecture hall went dead silent. 43 college students sat frozen, watching a 15-year-old accuse their professor of academic fraud. Professor Bennett's face flushed red. That's absurd. You're simply unable to solve it and you're making excuses. I can prove it. Amara erased a section of the board and began writing. Her handwriting was neat, precise, each step labeled clearly. The actual integral should be structured like this. When you apply integration by parts twice, using u equals x squared and dv equals e to the power of negative x dx, you get this result. Her chalk moved across the board with practiced efficiency. Setting up the formula. Calculating derivatives. Integrating step by step. The solution flowed from her hand like water from a faucet, natural, unstoppable, undeniable. First application of integration by parts gives us negative x squared times e to the power of negative x, evaluated from 0 to infinity, plus the integral of 2x times e to the power of negative x dx. The first term evaluates to 0 due to exponential decay. The second integral requires integration by parts again. She worked through the second integration, showing every calculation. Some college students leaned forward, trying to follow. Others pulled out their own calculators, checking her math. Second application gives us negative 2x times e to the power of negative x, evaluated from 0 to infinity, plus 2 times the integral of e to the power of negative x dx from 0 to infinity. Again, the first term is 0. The final integral evaluates to negative e to the power of negative x from 0 to infinity, which equals 1. Multiply by the coefficient 2, and you get the final answer, 2. Amara set down the chalk and turned to Professor Bennett. That's how you solve the correct equation. The one you should have written. The one that actually produces the answer of 2. What you wrote on the board before I arrived was deliberately constructed to be unsolvable, same answer claimed, but with a function that can't produce that result through any standard integration technique. Professor Bennett's face had gone from red to pale. You're making serious accusations. I'm stating mathematical facts. Amara's voice stayed calm but her eyes were steel. Either you made a significant error, which seems unlikely for someone with your credentials, or you deliberately wrote a fraudulent equation to test me specifically. Given that this is the third time this semester you've given me problems with bearers that coincidentally only appear on assignments you hand directly to me, I'm confident it's the latter. The lecture hall erupted in whispers. Students looking at each other, pulling up their phones, typing frantically. That's enough, Miss Williams, Professor Bennett started. Is it? Amara reached into her backpack, pulled out a small recording device that she set on the desk beside the blackboard. Because I have documentation of the other 2 times. September 15th, you gave me an exam with a statistics problem where you transposed 2 critical numbers, making the answer impossible to calculate correctly. You marked me wrong when I identified the error. October 3rd, you assigned me a proof that contained a circular logic fallacy and told me I failed to complete it when I explained why the proof was invalid as written. Both times, you gave correct versions of the same problems to other students. Professor Bennett's expression shifted from anger to something else. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. Recording without consent is legal in this state with single-party consent for documenting potential discrimination. Amara's voice didn't waver. I checked. Thoroughly. And the Dean of Students approved it after I presented evidence of your pattern of behavior 3 weeks ago. So every word you've said today, including your accusation that I'm cheating, is documented. Just like the fraudulent equation you wrote specifically to humiliate me in front of this class. Subscribe now, you won't believe what happens next. The door at the back of the lecture hall opened. Dr. Patricia Kim, Dean of Students, entered with 2 campus security officers. Her expression was professionally neutral but her presence spoke volumes. Professor Bennett, Dean Kim said, her voice carrying across the frozen classroom, we need to speak. In your office. Immediately. Professor Bennett looked at Amara, at the dean, at the 43 students recording on their phones, at the equation on the board that proved everything the 15-year-old girl had just accused him of. For 30 years, Professor Lawrence Bennett had controlled his classroom with absolute authority. Had decided who passed and who failed. Who belonged and who didn't. Had used equations and grades as weapons to enforce his own beliefs about who deserved to succeed in mathematics. Today, a 15-year-old black girl had just dismantled his authority with nothing but chalk and truth. And the entire university was watching. Amara sat in Dean Kim's office 3 hours later, her father beside her gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Through the window, Preston University's campus stretched out in autumn colors, red and gold leaves against brick buildings that had stood for 200 years. Buildings that had seen generations of students. Most of them wealthy. Most of them white. Very few of them 15 years old. Miss Williams, Dean Kim said, reviewing the documents spread across her desk, transcripts, recordings, emails dating back 3 months. I need to understand the full context. Why did you choose Professor Bennett's class specifically when you had multiple options for completing your calculus requirement? Amara's father, Dr. Marcus Williams, leaned forward. Dean Kim, my daughter shouldn't have to justify. It's okay, Dad. Amara touched his arm gently. I can explain. She took a breath, gathering thoughts she'd been organizing for years. My mother was Dr. Helena Williams, Amara began. She won the Fields Medal in mathematics when I was 8 years old. The first black woman to ever receive it. Do you know what happened afterward? Dean Kim shook her head. She received death threats. Letters telling her the award was affirmative action, not merit. Colleagues questioned whether her research was really hers or if she'd had help. She was invited to speak at conferences and then asked to prove she'd actually written her own papers. People assumed a black woman couldn't achieve that level of mathematical excellence without some kind of fraud. Amara's voice stayed level, but her hands tightened in her lap. My mother spent the last 4 years of her life defending her accomplishments instead of building on them. The stress contributed to her cancer, at least that's what her doctors suggested. Constant cortisol elevation from fighting the same battles over and over. I'm very sorry for your loss, Dean Kim said softly. Dr. Williams was brilliant. She was. And she knew exactly what I'd face. Amara pulled a worn notebook from her backpack. Purple cover, edges frayed from use. This was hers. She gave it to me 3 months before she died. Inside are mathematical problems she developed. But also notes. Advice. Warnings. She opened to a page marked with a purple ribbon. Her mother's handwriting, elegant but weakened by chemotherapy, filled the lined paper. Comment where you're watching from if you've ever faced doubt about your abilities. She wrote, Amara, you are more talented than I was at your age. That will scare people. They will test you in ways they don't test others. They will assume you're cheating. They will create impossible standards and then claim you failed to meet them. Document everything. Trust nothing. And never, ever let them make you small. Dr. Marcus Williams wiped his eyes. Helena knew. Even dying, she knew what our daughter would face. So when I got accepted to Preston's dual enrollment program at 13, Amara continued, I researched every mathematics professor. Found reviews from former students. Read academic papers. Looked for patterns. She pulled out a folder from her backpack, thick with printed pages, highlighted sections, handwritten notes. Professor Lawrence Bennett has taught at Preston for 30 years. In that time, he's had 247 students in his advanced courses. I tracked their demographics and grades. 83% of his white male students pass with B or higher. 42% of his female students pass. 21% of his black or Latino students pass. And those who fail? They consistently report that Professor Bennett questioned their presence in his classroom, gave them different problems than other students, and accused them of cheating when they succeeded. Dean Kim took the folder, began reading. Her expression darkened with each page. 17 former students filed informal complaints over the years, Amara said. None were investigated because they lacked hard evidence. Professor Bennett is careful. He doesn't use racial slurs. He doesn't explicitly state his biases. He just creates academic obstacles that conveniently affect certain students more than others. Impossible equations. Transposed numbers. Circular logic. Problems that look legitimate but aren't. So you enrolled in his class to document this, Dean Kim said, not quite a question. I enrolled in his class because I knew he'd target me. 15 years old. Black. Female. Daughter of a famous mathematician, which made me either a legacy he'd have to respect or a fraud he'd feel compelled to expose. I bet on the latter. Amara's voice hardened. I wore a recording device approved by your office. I saved every assignment. I documented every interaction. I gave him 3 months to prove me wrong. Instead, he proved me right. 3 times. Today was just the most public. Dr. Marcus Williams stood, pacing to the window. My wife died fighting this same battle. I will not let my daughter be destroyed by it too. If Preston University doesn't take action, real action, not just a slap on the wrist, we'll take this to the media. The State Education Board. Federal Civil Rights Investigators. Wherever it needs to go. Mr. Williams, I understand your anger, Dean Kim said. And you're right to be angry. What Professor Bennett did today was unconscionable. What Amara's documentation suggests about his pattern of behavior is deeply troubling. Troubling? Dr. Marcus Williams's voice rose. He tried to humiliate a child in front of 43 witnesses because he couldn't accept that she's smarter than him. That's not troubling. That's abuse of power. I agree. Dean Kim closed the folder. Which is why I'm recommending Professor Bennett's immediate suspension pending a full investigation. No classes. No student contact. No access to grades or records. I'm also recommending that the university hire an independent investigator to review every grade he's assigned in the past 5 years and every complaint ever filed against him. She looked at Amara. You took an enormous risk, Miss Williams. You're a minor. You're vulnerable. Professor Bennett could have done serious damage to your academic record, your reputation, your future. What you did today was brave. But it was also dangerous. I know. Amara met her eyes. My mother took the same risks. She fought the same fights. She died anyway. But before she died, she changed things. Made it slightly easier for the next generation. I'm doing the same thing. If I don't fight this now, when I'm documented and protected and have evidence, if I just transfer to another school like everyone expects, then the next black girl who walks into Professor Bennett's classroom will face exactly what I faced. Except she might not have a Fields Medal winner's notebooks to prove she belongs. Dean Kim studied her for a long moment. How old are you again? 15. I'll be 16 in January. You have the courage of someone twice your age. And the strategy of someone with a law degree. Dean Kim stood, extended her hand. Professor Bennett is suspended as of this moment. The investigation begins tomorrow. And Miss Williams? For what it's worth, your mother would be very proud. Amara shook her hand. She told me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. Today, I was terrified. It didn't show, Dean Kim said. Good. That was the point. Subscribe, the real fight is just beginning. As they left Dean Kim's office, Dr. Marcus Williams pulled his daughter close. You know this isn't over. Professor Bennett has tenure, resources, probably a lawyer on retainer. This investigation could take months. Maybe years. Are you sure you want to do this? Amara looked at her mother's notebook in her hands. Thought about the Fields medal sitting in a case at home. Thought about the 15-year-old black girl who might apply to Preston next year because she'd heard about Amara Williams and decided maybe she belonged too. I'm sure, Dad. Mom didn't raise me to run from fights. She raised me to win them. Then we fight, her father said. Together. They walked across campus toward the parking lot. Behind them, in Professor Bennett's office, a career built on discrimination was beginning to crumble. And somewhere, Amara hoped her mother was watching. The conference room on Preston University's third floor smelled like stale coffee and tension. 5 days after Professor Bennett's suspension, the independent investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Dr. Rachel Okonkwo from the State Education Board, sat surrounded by boxes of files, transcripts, and complaint records dating back 15 years. Amara sat across from her, answering questions she'd already answered 3 times. Her father waited outside, forced to stay in the hallway because the investigation required student interviews to be conducted without parental presence. Let's go through September 15th again, Dr. Okonkwo said, pulling up a document on her laptop. You say Professor Bennett gave you an exam with incorrect data. Walk me through exactly what happened. Amara had her own records organized in a binder, color-coded tabs, printed screenshots, dates and times meticulously documented. She opened to the yellow section. The exam was on probability distributions. Question 7 asked us to calculate the standard deviation of a dataset. Professor Bennett's version, which he handed directly to me while other students received theirs from the stack on his desk, contained numbers that didn't match the normal distribution parameters required for the calculation method he'd taught us. She pulled out 2 printed copies, her exam and another student's exam, obtained from a classmate. Side by side, they told the story. Same question. Different numbers. Hers made the problem unsolvable using the required method. I wrote on the exam that the data appeared incorrect and showed why the calculation couldn't be completed as stated. I provided what the correct numbers should be and solved it that way. Professor Bennett marked me wrong. Gave me a 0 on that question. When I asked him about it after class, he said I was making excuses for not knowing the material. Dr. Okonkwo compared the 2 exams, her expression darkening. And you documented this how? I kept both exams. Photographed them. Sent them to myself via email with timestamp. Then I requested a meeting with Professor Bennett during his office hours and recorded the conversation with the device Dean Kim approved. She pulled out a small digital recorder, pressed play. Professor Bennett's voice emerged, cold and dismissive. Miss Williams, the problem was perfectly solvable. If you weren't able to complete it, that reflects your understanding, not my test design. Amara's 15-year-old voice responded, calmer than she'd felt. Professor Bennett, the numbers you provided don't follow normal distribution parameters. If you apply the formula you taught us, you get an imaginary number as the result, which isn't possible for standard deviation. Then perhaps you should reconsider whether you're ready for advanced mathematics. Not everyone belongs at this level. The recording ended. Hit subscribe if you think this professor deserves what's coming. Dr. Okonkwo sat back in her chair. That's remarkably clear evidence. You've built a stronger case than most lawyers twice your age. My mother taught me to document everything, Amara said quietly. She said in mathematics, proof is everything. Same principle applies to discrimination. Over the next 3 hours, Dr. Okonkwo interviewed 6 other students, all women or minorities who'd taken Professor Bennett's courses over the past 5 years. Their stories formed a pattern so clear it was damning. Keisha Martinez, graduated 2 years ago with a degree in engineering despite failing Bennett's calculus course twice. He told me my English wasn't good enough to understand complex mathematics. I was born in Texas. English is my first language. I'm not even sure why he assumed otherwise, probably because my last name is Martinez. I had to retake calculus with a different professor and got an A. David Chen, currently a senior. Professor Bennett consistently mispronounced my name even after I corrected him 6 times. He'd call on me and ask if I understood American teaching methods or if I needed things explained differently. I've lived in Massachusetts my entire life. My father teaches economics at Harvard. But Bennett treated me like I just arrived from China and didn't speak English. Jasmine Brooks, junior mathematics major. I got perfect scores on the first 3 exams. Then Professor Bennett started giving me different versions of tests than other students. He said it was to prevent cheating. My versions always had errors or ambiguities. When I'd point them out, he'd accuse me of making excuses. I had to withdraw from his class to protect my GPA. The pattern was undeniable. Professor Bennett targeted students systematically based on race, gender, and ethnicity. Modified their exams. Questioned their capabilities. Created hostile environments that forced them to either fail or withdraw. By the end of the week, Dr. Okonkwo had interviewed 23 current and former students. 18 reported similar treatment. 5 others admitted they'd been too afraid to come forward but had witnessed the behavior. Then came the emails. Preston University's IT department, under court order, had retrieved Professor Bennett's complete email archive. 5,000 messages over 10 years. Dr. Okonkwo read through them with Amara's father present as a witness, documenting the most damaging ones. An email to a colleague from 2018, another batch of diversity admissions flooding my classroom. Standards are dropping faster than I can fail them out. From 2020, the Williams girl started this semester. Daughter of that Fields Medal winner. Probably got in on her mother's reputation. I'll make sure she's properly tested. From 3 months ago, Miss Williams scored perfectly on another exam. Impossible for someone her age. I'm going to prove she's cheating if it's the last thing I do. And the most damaging, from 2 weeks before the classroom confrontation, I've designed a trap for the Williams girl. Public demonstration that will expose her fraud. She'll either fail spectacularly or refuse to attempt it, both of which prove my point. The diversity experiment at Preston needs to end. Dr. Marcus Williams read that last email 3 times, his hands shaking with rage. He planned this. 4 weeks. He deliberately constructed a scenario to humiliate a 15-year-old child because he couldn't accept that she earned her grades. Dr. Okonkwo closed her laptop. Mr. Williams, I've conducted over 200 educational discrimination investigations in my career. This is the most clear-cut case I've ever seen. Professor Bennett didn't. Amara's father pressed. He has tenure. Connections. Resources. He has evidence of deliberate discrimination in writing, Dr. Okonkwo countered. Tenure protects academic freedom. It doesn't protect criminal conduct. And targeting a 15-year-old student with fabricated academic challenges while explicitly stating intent to prove she's cheating crosses the line from bias to harassment. Subscribe now, this story is far from over. That evening, news broke on social media. Someone had leaked portions of Professor Bennett's emails. Not the official investigation, that was confidential. But a student who'd received the emails secondhand posted screenshots on Twitter. Within 3 hours, #Bennett emails was trending nationally. By midnight, Professor Lawrence Bennett had hired Marcus Crawford, one of Boston's most expensive education lawyers, known for defending professors accused of misconduct. The legal team sent a letter to Preston University before dawn. Professor Bennett denied all allegations, claimed selective editing of emails taken out of context, and threatened a lawsuit for defamation, wrongful termination, and conspiracy to destroy his career. Named in the potential lawsuit, Preston University, Dr. Okonkwo, Dean Kim, and Amara Williams personally. A 15-year-old girl who'd only wanted to learn mathematics without facing discrimination was now facing the possibility of years in court and millions in legal fees. The fight was just beginning. And Professor Bennett had no intention of going down quietly. The video went viral overnight. Not the official investigation footage, that remained confidential. But a student recording from the back of the lecture hall, shakily filmed on a phone, capturing the moment Amara exposed Professor Bennett's fraudulent equation. Within 24 hours, 3 million views. By day 2, 15 million. By day 3, major news networks were calling it the equation that exposed academic racism. Amara watched CNN from her dorm room, her roommate hovering nervously in the doorway. On screen, a panel of educators debated whether Professor Bennett's actions constituted discrimination or rigorous academic standards. A professor has the right to challenge students, argued Dr. Gerald Whitmore, a conservative education commentator. Perhaps this young woman is oversensitive. Perhaps she's weaponizing race because she couldn't handle legitimate academic pressure. She solved the equation, the moderator interjected. And proved it was deliberately written incorrectly. Allegedly, Whitmore countered. We're taking a 15-year-old's word over a decorated professor with 30 years of experience. Amara turned off the television, her hands trembling. Oversensitive. Weaponizing race. The same accusations her mother had faced. The same words designed to make victims look like aggressors. Her phone buzzed constantly. Text messages. Emails. Social media notifications flooding in faster than she could read them. She'd made her Twitter account private, but that hadn't stopped thousands of people from finding ways to contact her. Some messages offered support: "You're brilliant. Don't let them silence you. Your mother would be proud. Thank you for fighting this." Others contained threats: "You're destroying a good man's career because you played the race card. Affirmative action baby couldn't handle real standards. Watch your back." The worst ones were graphic. Violent. Explicit threats against a 15-year-old girl that made her father immediately contact campus security and local police. "This is what happens when you challenge power," Dr. Marcus Williams said, pacing their small off-campus apartment where Amara now stayed instead of her dorm after someone spray-painted a racial slur on her door. "They can't attack your evidence, so they attack you personally." 2 days later, Professor Bennett gave his first interview. Not to a local station. To Fox News, where he knew he'd find a sympathetic audience. Hit subscribe if you want to see how this story ends. Amara watched it with her father, both of them silent as Professor Bennett portrayed himself as the victim of cancel culture and political correctness destroying academic excellence. "I've dedicated my life to mathematical education," Professor Bennett said, his voice heavy with manufactured emotion. 30 years of teaching. 23 published papers. Thousands of students who've succeeded under my guidance. And now a single student, who happened to be failing my rigorous standards, has decided to destroy my reputation by claiming discrimination. But she wasn't failing, the interviewer noted. Reports indicate she had perfect scores. "Which is precisely what raised my concerns," Professor Bennett said smoothly. "A 15-year-old achieving perfection in graduate-level mathematics? That's statistically improbable. I had a responsibility to ensure academic integrity. That's not discrimination, that's due diligence." "So you're saying she was cheating?" "I'm saying her performance warranted closer examination. Instead of accepting that examination, she chose to record private conversations, manipulate context, and launch a coordinated attack against me with support from university administrators who are more concerned with diversity optics than academic standards." The interviewer leaned forward. "Miss Williams has provided documentation, emails where you explicitly stated intent to prove she's cheating." Taken out of context, Professor Bennett said without hesitation. "I have concerns about a student. I document those concerns. That's standard academic practice. What's not standard is a minor recording conversations without consent, building a case over months, and then weaponizing accusations of racism when faced with legitimate academic challenge." Amara's father threw the remote at the television. It bounced off the screen, leaving a small crack. "He's lying. Every word. And people will believe him because he's a respected white professor and you're a black teenager." Not everyone will believe him, Amara said quietly, though her voice shook. Dr. Okonkwo's investigation found 18 other students. His emails are documented. The evidence is clear. Evidence doesn't matter if public opinion has already decided you're the villain. Her father pulled her close. Baby, I think we should consider MIT's offer. Transfer there. Get you out of this situation before it gets worse. If I leave, he wins. Amara's voice hardened. He gets to claim I ran because I couldn't back up my accusations. Every student who comes after me faces the same thing. Mom didn't run from fights. Neither will I. Your mother had the full weight of academic institutions behind her. You're 15 and facing death threats. Before Amara could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Williams. This is Professor Angela Torres from Stanford University. I was a student of your mother's at MIT. I need to tell you something about Professor Bennett that might help your case. Amara put the call on speaker. What is it? 20 years ago, I was a graduate student in Bennett's program at his previous university before he came to Preston. He did the same thing to me, different exams, accusations of cheating, hostile environment. I filed a complaint. The university buried it in exchange for his resignation and a promise to never discuss what happened. He moved to Preston with a clean record. Why didn't you come forward before? Amara asked. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But after seeing what he's doing to you, I spoke with lawyers. There's an exception in the NDA for preventing ongoing harm to others. I can testify. And I have documentation. Including emails proving the university knew about his pattern of discrimination and covered it up to avoid scandal. Amara's heart raced. How many other students were there? That I know of. 11. All women or minorities. All accused of cheating. All faced impossible standards. Some left academia entirely because of what he did to their confidence and careers. Will they testify? I've been calling them all week. 7 have agreed to come forward. The university threatened them with NDA violations, but they're willing to risk it because you were brave enough to document everything and fight back. Professor Torres paused. Your mother taught me that mathematics requires proof. You've provided proof. Now let us help you finish what you started. After the call ended, Dr. Marcus Williams looked at his daughter. 7 more witnesses. Documentation of a cover-up. This changes everything. It also makes me a bigger target, Amara said. Bennett's not just fighting to keep his job anymore. He's fighting to avoid criminal charges and a career-ending scandal. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an email from Marcus Crawford, Professor Bennett's lawyer. Miss Williams, my client is prepared to offer a settlement. You withdraw all accusations, sign a confidentiality agreement, and transfer to another institution. In exchange, Professor Bennett will not pursue legal action against you or your family. You have 48 hours to respond. After that, we proceed with a defamation lawsuit that will cost your family everything. 48 hours to decide, take the money and disappear, or keep fighting and risk destruction. Subscribe now, her choice will shock you. Amara read the email 3 times. Then she opened her laptop and began typing her response. She wasn't 15 years old. She was Dr. Helena Williams's daughter. And Williams women didn't back down from fights they knew they could win. Amara's dorm room door hung open, yellow police tape crisscrossing the entrance like a warning. Campus security had been called at 3 a.m. when her roommate returned from studying to find the destruction. Now, at 8 a.m., Amara stood in the doorway with her father, both of them staring at what remained of her mother's legacy. The notebooks, 17 volumes of Dr. Helena Williams's mathematical research, handwritten theorems and proofs spanning 40 years of brilliance, lay scattered across the floor. Pages ripped from bindings. Ink smeared with water. Some burned in the metal sink, their edges charred and crumbling. Purple covers torn. Equations destroyed. Her mother's voice, written in elegant script, reduced to ashes and wet pulp. On the wall above Amara's bed, someone had spray-painted in red, "Go back where you belong." For the first time since this began, Amara's careful composure shattered. She dropped to her knees among the ruined pages, hands shaking as she tried to gather pieces that would never fit back together. Tears she'd held back for months finally broke through, hot and unstoppable. "My mom's work," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Everything she left me. It's gone." Dr. Marcus Williams pulled out his phone, hands trembling with rage as he dialed campus security. "My daughter is 15 years old. Someone broke into her room and destroyed irreplaceable research materials." Where the hell was security? A campus officer stood nearby, writing notes that felt utterly inadequate. "We're reviewing camera footage. The perpetrator wore a hoodie and mask. We'll do everything we can." "That's not good enough." Dr. Marcus Williams's voice echoed down the hallway. "My daughter has been receiving death threats for 2 weeks. Someone spray-painted racial slurs on her door. And now this? You failed to protect a minor in your care." The officer couldn't meet his eyes. "Sir, I understand your frustration. You understand nothing." Dar. Marcus Williams grabbed Amara's backpack, what remained of the notebooks, the few belongings not destroyed. "We're leaving. Right now. This university has proven it cannot protect my daughter. We're done." "Dad, no," Amara started, but her father cut her off. "This isn't up for discussion. Someone broke in and destroyed your mother's life's work. They left a thread on your wall. What's next? What happens when they decide to hurt you physically instead of just destroying property?" He turned to the officer. "We're withdrawing from Preston effective immediately. Send the paperwork wherever it needs to go." 2 hours later, they sat in their apartment surrounded by boxes, Amara's face red from crying, her father making arrangements to transfer her back to their home in Chicago. MIT had already sent an acceptance letter. Safety. Distance. A fresh start away from Professor Bennett and the nightmare he'd created. But Amara couldn't stop staring at the ruined notebook spread across their coffee table. Pages she'd tried to salvage. Equations half destroyed. Her mother's handwriting visible in fragments. A knock on the door made them both jump. Dr. Marcus Williams checked the peephole, then opened it cautiously. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the hallway. Preston's only Asian female mathematics professor, 53 years old with steel-gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen their own battles. Hit subscribe, what she's about to reveal changes everything. "May I come in?" Dr. Tanaka asked quietly. Once inside, she surveyed the damaged notebooks with an expression of deep sadness. Then she pulled a leather messenger bag from her shoulder and set it on the table. 8 years ago, Dr. Tanaka began, I was up for tenure at Preston. My research was groundbreaking, multiple publications in top-tier journals, teaching awards, glowing student reviews. The committee vote should have been unanimous. She opened her bag, pulled out a folder. Instead, one person voted against me. Professor Lawrence Bennett. He wrote a detailed opposition letter claiming my research lacked rigor, my teaching methods were too accommodating, and that awarding tenure to another diversity hire would lower departmental standards. Dr. Marcus Williams took the letter, read it, his expression darkening. He tried to destroy your career. He tried. He failed because I had allies on the committee. But the fight nearly broke me. I considered leaving academia entirely. Dr. Tanaka pulled out another folder. After your daughter exposed Professor Bennett, I started reaching out to former colleagues. Asking questions. Documenting patterns. I found 6 other female and minority faculty members Bennett had tried to sabotage over 20 years. We've been collecting evidence. She pulled out a laptop, opened it. More importantly, I need to show you something about your mother's notebooks. Amara looked up, wiping her eyes. What about them? Dr. Helena Williams and I were colleagues. We published together twice. She was brilliant and careful, obsessively so. She knew her work would be scrutinized more harshly than others because of her race and gender. Dr. Tanaka pulled up a cloud storage folder. 6 months before she died, she sent me digital scans of all 17 notebooks. Every page. Every equation. Every note. She asked me to keep them safe in case anything ever happened to the originals. Amara stopped breathing. You have copies? Complete copies. High-resolution scans. Every single page preserved digitally. Dr. Tanaka turned the laptop toward her. Your mother told me, my daughter will face what I faced. Maybe worse. Make sure my work survives to support her when I can't. The screen showed her mother's handwriting, clear and perfect. Equations intact. Notes preserved. The legacy Amara thought was destroyed, safe and whole. Your mother knew, Dr. Tanaka continued softly. She knew people would try to erase her work, discredit her legacy, hurt her daughter through destroying what she'd built. So she made sure it couldn't be destroyed. She protected you, even after death. Dr. Marcus Williams sat down hard, tears streaming down his face. Helena. God, Helena, you brilliant woman. Amara took the laptop with shaking hands, scrolling through pages she thought she'd lost forever. Her mother's voice, preserved. Her mother's wisdom, intact. The inheritance that connected them across death, safe. There's more, Dr. Tanaka said. The 6 faculty members Bennett targeted. We've been building our own case for 8 years. Waiting for the right moment. Amara, you gave us that moment. Your documentation, your courage, your evidence, it's the keystone that makes our entire case solid. She pulled out a thick binder. We have testimonies from 34 students spanning 2 decades. We have emails proving Bennett's discrimination. We have evidence that Preston's administration knew about complaints and buried them. We have proof that Bennett's previous university paid settlements to at least 4 students he targeted before he came here. Why didn't you come forward before? Dr. Marcus Williams asked. Because individually, we looked like disgruntled employees. Bennett is careful, he covers his tracks, uses plausible deniability, makes it look like academic judgment rather than discrimination. But Amara was smarter than all of us. She documented everything from day one. She created an evidence trail so clear that even his lawyers can't spin it. She gave us the proof we needed. Subscribe now, the final battle is coming. Dr. Tanaka looked at Amara. I know you've been hurt. I know you're scared. And I know your father wants to protect you by leaving. That's valid. That's understandable. But if you leave now, Bennett wins. He gets to claim you ran because your accusations were false. He gets to keep teaching, keep targeting students, keep destroying careers and futures. My daughter has sacrificed enough, Dr. Marcus Williams said firmly. Someone destroyed her mother's notebooks. She's received death threats. She's 15 years old. When is it enough? When it's finished, Amara said quietly. She looked at the laptop, at her mother's preserved work, at the evidence Dr. Tanaka had brought. Mom didn't run. Even when people tried to destroy her, she kept fighting. If I leave now, I'm letting them win. I'm letting Bennett keep hurting students. I'm proving that 15-year-old black girls can be intimidated into silence. She stood up, wiping her face. How long until the university board makes their decision on Bennett's termination? 3 days, Dr. Tanaka said. They vote on whether to fire him or accept his resignation. Then we have 3 days to present everything. All the evidence. All the testimonies. Everything that proves this isn't about one equation or one student. It's about decades of systematic discrimination. Dr. Marcus Williams looked at his daughter, 15 years old, traumatized, threatened, and still refusing to back down. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," Amara admitted. "But Mom taught me that fear means you're doing something important. Let's finish this." 6 months crawled by like years. Professor Bennett refused the university's request for quiet resignation. Instead, his lawyer filed federal lawsuits against Preston University, Dr. Okonkwo, Dean Kim, Dr. Tanaka, and Amara personally, claiming conspiracy, defamation, and violation of his academic freedom rights. Now, at 16 years old, Amara sat in federal court wearing a navy blue dress her father had bought specifically for testimony days. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and stress. Behind her, the gallery was packed with reporters, students, and supporters wearing purple ribbons, Dr. Helena Williams's signature color. Judge Maria Rodriguez presided, a 62-year-old Latina woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for zero tolerance of legal theatrics. She'd already dismissed 3 motions from Bennett's legal team attempting to exclude evidence. Marcus Crawford, Professor Bennett's lawyer, stood before the jury, 12 people who would decide whether Bennett's actions constituted discrimination or legitimate academic judgment. Crawford was expensive, experienced, and ruthless. He wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent and spoke with the kind of confidence money bought. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Crawford began, his voice smooth as silk, "this case is not about discrimination. It's about academic standards. Professor Lawrence Bennett has dedicated 30 years to mathematical excellence. He has published 23 peer-reviewed papers. He has taught thousands of students who've gone on to successful careers. His methods may be rigorous, but rigor is not racism." He gestured toward Amara. "The plaintiff, Miss Williams, is undoubtedly talented. No one disputes that. But talent doesn't exempt anyone from academic evaluation. When Professor Bennett identified inconsistencies in her performance, perfect scores that seemed statistically improbable for someone her age, he had a professional duty to investigate. That's not targeting. That's teaching." Crawford pulled up slides showing Amara's test scores. Perfect marks on every assignment. Every quiz. Every exam. For 3 consecutive months. Now, I ask you, is it discriminatory to question such perfection? Or is it reasonable academic skepticism? Hit subscribe if you think he's about to get destroyed. He walked toward the jury box. Miss Williams recorded private conversations without Professor Bennett's knowledge. She built a case over months, documenting every interaction, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This wasn't a student suffering discrimination. This was a calculated campaign to destroy a professor's career because she couldn't handle being questioned. The fraudulent equation? Crawford waved dismissively. Professor Bennett maintains it was a teaching exercise about verifying problem statements, a common pedagogical technique. Miss Williams interpreted it as an attack because she's been taught to see racism in academic rigor. That's not discrimination. That's oversensitivity weaponized against a decorated educator. He returned to his table, shuffled papers. And let's discuss Miss Williams's background. She's the daughter of Dr. Helena Williams, a Fields Medal winner. She grew up surrounded by advanced mathematics. She had access to resources and education most students never receive. Yet when faced with a professor who didn't automatically defer to her pedigree, she cried discrimination. That's not courage, ladies and gentlemen. That's entitlement. Crawford sat down, confident he'd made his point. Amara's lawyer, Jennifer Park, a civil rights attorney who'd taken the case pro bono after reading about it, stood up. She was 43, Korean American, and had built her career defending students and faculty against institutional discrimination. "Mr. Crawford just told you a story," Park began. "A story about an oversensitive student who couldn't handle academic pressure. A story about a dedicated professor victimized by political correctness. It's a compelling story. It's also completely false. She pulled up her first exhibit, Professor Bennett's emails. Let's talk about what actually happened. This is an email Professor Bennett sent 3 months before he confronted Miss Williams publicly. Read it with me. The Williams girl started this semester. I'm going to prove she's cheating if it's the last thing I do. The words hung in the air. Several jury members leaned forward, reading closely. Not, I'm going to evaluate her fairly, Park continued. Not, I have concerns about academic integrity. But, I'm going to prove she's cheating. That's not skepticism. That's predetermined conclusion looking for justification. She pulled up the fraudulent equation. Mr. Crawford called this a teaching exercise. But Professor Bennett gave this equation only to Miss Williams. Not to the other 43 students. Just her. The only black student in the class. The only minor. The only one he'd already decided was cheating. He created an unsolvable problem designed to make her fail publicly, then accused her of fraud when she exposed his manipulation. Park walked toward the jury. But this isn't just about one equation or one student. Professor Bennett has targeted minority and female students systematically for 20 years. We have testimony from 37 students. We have emails spanning 2 decades. We have proof that his previous university paid settlements to 4 students he discriminated against before coming to Preston. She pulled up grade distribution data. Look at these numbers. 83% of Professor Bennett's white male students pass with B or higher. 42% of female students. 21% of black or Latino students. That's not rigorous standards. That's statistical evidence of disparate treatment. Next slide, testimony from Professor Angela Torres. 20 years ago, Professor Bennett did the same thing to Dr. Torres that he did to Miss Williams. Different exams. Accusations of cheating. Hostile environment. The university covered it up. She signed an NDA. But when she saw Bennett targeting a 15-year-old girl, she broke that agreement to testify because preventing ongoing harm takes precedence over protecting institutions. Park turned to face Professor Bennett directly. You didn't question Miss Williams's perfect scores because they were statistically improbable. You questioned them because you couldn't accept that a young black girl was smarter than you expected. When she proved her intelligence repeatedly, you didn't reassess your assumptions. You doubled down. You created traps. You manipulated exams. You wrote emails about destroying her credibility. That's not teaching. That's harassment. She pulled up the final exhibit, security footage from the dorm break-in. And when all your academic manipulation failed, when Miss Williams kept succeeding despite everything you did, someone broke into her room and destroyed her mother's research notebooks. 17 volumes of Dr. Helena Williams's life work, burned and torn apart. A 15-year-old's inheritance from her dead mother, destroyed. We can't prove Professor Bennett personally committed that act, Park continued. But we can prove he created an environment where students felt emboldened to attack Miss Williams. We can prove his public accusations of fraud painted a target on her back. We can prove he made her existence at Preston so hostile that destruction of property felt like an acceptable escalation. Park returned to her table, pulled out one more document. This is Professor Bennett's settlement offer to Miss Williams. 48 hours to withdraw accusations, sign an NDA, and disappear. Or face legal action designed to bankrupt her family. That's not the behavior of an innocent man defending his reputation. That's the behavior of someone trying to silence a witness. Subscribe, the verdict will blow your mind. She faced the jury for the final time. Miss Williams is 16 years old. She's been threatened, harassed, and traumatized. But she's still here, testifying, because she knows if she doesn't fight this, Professor Bennett will keep targeting students. Keep destroying careers. Keep using academic authority as a weapon against anyone he deems unworthy. This case is simple. Professor Lawrence Bennett abused his power to discriminate against students based on race and gender for decades. The evidence is overwhelming. The pattern is undeniable. The only question is whether we hold him accountable or tell every student like Amara Williams that discrimination is acceptable if you call it academic rigor. Park sat down. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Rodriguez looked at both legal teams. We'll adjourn for deliberation. The jury will review all evidence and testimony. Given the complexity of this case, I expect deliberation to take several days. But it didn't take days. It took 4 hours. When the jury returned, their faces told the story before words did. We find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. Professor Lawrence Bennett's career was over. 2 years later, Amara Williams stood in front of Lecture Hall C at Preston University. Not as a student this time, as a guest lecturer. At 18 years old, she just completed her junior year at MIT with a near-perfect GPA and 2 published papers in mathematical journals. The room was packed. 140 students filled seats designed for 80. They sat on steps, stood along walls, crowded the doorway. News had spread that Dr. Helena Williams's daughter was returning to the campus where everything had changed. Professor Bennett's former classroom had been renovated. Fresh paint covered walls that once held hostility. New desks replaced old ones. But the blackboard remained, the same one where Amara had exposed a fraudulent equation and triggered a reckoning that changed Preston forever. Dean Patricia Kim introduced her, older now with more gray in her hair. 2 years ago, this university failed Amara Williams. We allowed a culture of discrimination to thrive unchecked. We protected reputation over students. We chose comfort over justice. Today, we honor the courage it took for a 15-year-old girl to demand better. Please welcome Amara Williams. Applause filled the room. Amara walked to the front, her purple dress, her mother's color, bright against the neutral walls. She'd grown taller, her face more mature but still carrying the determination that had sustained her through testimony, trials, and transformation. Thank you for coming, Amara began, her voice steady. I want to tell you what happened after the verdict. Because the courtroom battle was just the beginning. She pulled up slides showing the aftermath. Judge Rodriguez ruled in our favor on all counts. Professor Bennett was permanently banned from teaching at any accredited institution. He lost his tenure, his position, and his reputation. Preston University paid a settlement, not to me personally, but to establish the Dr. Helena Williams Equity Fund for underrepresented students in STEM fields. Next slide, numbers. That fund has supported 63 students in 2 years. Students from backgrounds similar to mine. Students who face barriers that privilege never sees. Students who deserve opportunities not because of charity, but because of talent. But money wasn't the most important outcome. Amara clicked to a new slide showing policy documents. Preston implemented mandatory bias training for all faculty. They established an independent oversight committee to review discrimination complaints, no more internal investigations that universities can bury. They created clear protocols for addressing power imbalances between professors and students. And they published annual demographic data showing grade distributions by race and gender, making patterns of discrimination visible. A hand went up in the audience. Amara nodded. Did Professor Bennett ever apologize? A young woman asked. No. Amara's voice stayed even. He maintains to this day that he was the victim of a witch hunt. His lawyer filed appeals that were denied. He wrote a book claiming academic freedom is under attack. Some people still believe his version. That's okay. The evidence speaks louder than his denial. Hit subscribe if you believe actions matter more than apologies. Another hand. A young black man, maybe 19, sitting in the front row. How did you keep going? When people attacked you, threatened you, destroyed your mother's work, how did you not give up? Amara smiled sadly. Honestly? Some days I wanted to. The night my mom's notebooks were destroyed, I was ready to leave Preston and never look back. But Dr. Tanaka showed me that my mother had protected her legacy. She knew people would try to erase her work, so she made copies. She knew I'd face what she faced, so she left me tools to fight. She pulled out a worn purple notebook, original now, recovered from digital scans. My mother wrote this 6 months before she died. She wrote, "Amara, they will question you. They will test you harder than others. They will assume you don't belong. Prove them wrong not once, but repeatedly. Document everything. Trust evidence. And remember that your presence in spaces where you're not expected is resistance itself." Amara's voice caught. She was right. My presence in Professor Bennett's classroom, a 15-year-old black girl in a space designed for white college students, was threatening to him. Not because I was failing, but because I was succeeding. My success challenged his worldview. So he tried to eliminate the challenge instead of examining his assumptions. But here's what he didn't understand. Amara walked across the front of the room. You can't eliminate us. For every student you push out, 10 more are coming. For every career you try to destroy, we build networks that catch each other. For every door you slam shut, we find windows. And when there are no windows, we break through walls. She pulled up her final slide, a photo of herself with 17 other students, all minorities, all studying STEM fields at various universities. These students reached out to me after the trial. They'd faced similar discrimination at their schools. Some documented it like I did. Others were too scared. But all of them were inspired to keep fighting. 3 of them filed formal complaints at their universities. 2 cases resulted in professor terminations. 4 universities implemented new policies. That's the real legacy, not my individual victory, but the systemic change it triggered. A young Latina woman raised her hand. What advice do you have for students facing discrimination now? Document everything, Amara said immediately. Every email. Every conversation. Every assignment. Create timestamps. Save evidence in multiple locations. Find allies, other students, sympathetic faculty, administrators who actually care. And most importantly, understand that you're not oversensitive for recognizing discrimination. You're perceptive. Trust your perception. She paused. But also, and this is crucial, take care of your mental health. Fighting systems is exhausting. It's traumatic. I spent months in therapy processing what happened. That's not weakness. That's survival. You can fight injustice and prioritize your well-being. Those aren't contradictory. The lecture continued for another hour. Questions about legal strategy. Questions about maintaining academic performance while building a case. Questions about dealing with public attention. Questions about fear. Afterward, students lined up to speak with her. A 14-year-old girl from Dorchester, attending Preston's summer program, approached nervously. I saw the news about what happened, she said quietly. About what you did. I applied to Preston because of you. I got in because of the Dr. Helena Williams Scholarship. I start in the fall. Amara pulled out a USB drive, pressed it into the girl's hand. These are my mother's digitized notebooks. All 17 volumes. She was the first black woman to win the Fields Medal. She taught me that knowledge is immortal. Use these. Learn from them. And when you face people who question whether you belong, and you will face them, remember that you're standing on the shoulders of every black woman who fought before you. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. No, Amara said gently. Thank you. For having the courage to walk through doors people tried to close. That's how we change the world, one courageous decision at a time. Subscribe, stories like this need to be heard. That evening, Amara visited her mother's grave. The headstone read, Dr. Helena Williams, 1970 to 2023, Fields Medal winner, mother, pioneer. Amara placed a copy of the court verdict beside fresh purple flowers. "We won, Mom," she whispered. "Not just the case. The whole system. Professor Bennett can't hurt anyone else. Preston changed their policies. 63 students have opportunities because of what we did. Your legacy didn't die when you did. It multiplied." A breeze rustled through trees. Amara liked to imagine it was her mother's response. At 18, Amara had already accomplished what most people never would. She'd exposed systemic discrimination. Changed institutional policy. Inspired countless students. Published research. Earned admission to every top university in the country. But her proudest achievement was simpler: she'd kept her promise to her mother. She'd proven that one person refusing to be silent could change everything. She'd shown that courage wasn't about not being afraid, it was about being terrified and acting anyway. And she'd ensured that the next 15-year-old black girl who walked into a classroom where she wasn't expected would face a system slightly more just than the one Amara had encountered. That was legacy. That was mathematics more important than any equation. That was Dr. Helena Williams's daughter, carrying forward the fight her mother started. And refusing to let it end until justice was no longer the exception, but the rule.